Hey, Facebook. Derek Wetmore here, Twins analyst for 1500ESPN.com from the swanky studios of actually my living room. I'm lying. They're not swanky studios. But I am here to take any of your questions. If you have anything relating to the trade deadline or the Yankees series or the way the Twins have been run since Derek Falvey and Thad Levine took over in November, I'm here to answer them. I'm guessing that most questions here will be focused on the trade deadline, and that's totally fine. I'm not a big guy on rumors, innuendo, and speculation, but I understand there's an appetite for that, and I'll help answer any questions that I possibly can. I'm going to send out this link on Twitter. If you'd give me a second, we've got our Facebook audience coming in here, the room filling up. Leave your questions in the comments section. I'll get to as many of them as I possibly can today. We had a little bit of a technical glitch, so I think I'll be hanging out here till like 1:40 or so. If you have trade deadline related questions, Yankee series related questions, or news around Major League Baseball, there's another big trade today. The Yankees made a big trade recently, and big, I guess, is in quotation marks in this case because the Mariners acquired reliever David Phelps. It's kind of like an eighth inning guy from the Fish. So let me send this link out to our good friends on Twitter so that they can join the fun too. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comment box below. Sorry, bear with me a second. Okay, cool. I'll get this party started, and then if you guys have any questions, I'll jump in and answer those rapid fire while I'm enjoying my coffee. But the interesting thing to me about the Yankee series, the Twins take 2 of 3. And now, why is that interesting on its surface? It's not. It's a one series, but it helped debunk, I think, a couple of the narratives that had been building up around this team. 3 of them, really, all at once. Jose Barrios dispatched those on Sunday. Number 1 is that the Twins can't win at home. Their first half struggles at home were mystifying. I don't quite understand why. Yeah, they played some good teams, but their pitching went from, like, respectable on the road to, oh my gosh, at home. And I don't know what the disparity was caused by. It wasn't just the fact that Irvin Santana and Barrios were starting all the road games and everybody else was starting at home. I checked into that. That's not the case. The start distribution was relatively even in terms of guys you think should give you a chance and guys like Adam Wilk, Nick Tepish, who you just didn't feel good starting the game. I don't know exactly what it was, but the Twins did away with that a little bit this week. They played the Astros and the Yankees, 2 of the very best teams in baseball, especially now that the Yankees have added to their bullpen arsenal. They split. 3-3. They lost a series to the Astros, salvaged a game, and then they took 2 of 3 from the Yankees. So that's number 2, the thing they dispatched. Number 1 is you can't win at home. Number 2 is you can't beat good teams. The Twins are kind of right there with 2 pretty good teams. The Astros are clearly a better baseball team than them. The Yankees, I would say, talent for talent, clearly a better team than the Twins, and yet you take 2 games out of 3 and you're sniffing around with postseason. Cleveland lost the other day, so the Twins are right there, and it's July 20th. The Twins are still in it. So, thought number 1 was can't win at home. Thought number 2 is can't compete with the big boys. They did that. And then number 3 was Twins not hitting with runners in scoring position lately. I think that tends to be a bit of a fluky stat. Although, as I was talking with one Twins player the other day, who I just won't name because of the contents of the conversation, it was, all right, some of this stuff is random. Sometimes runners in scoring position, those numbers will figure themselves out by the end of the season. Would not worry about it. Would not spend a lot of time thinking about, do you come up with the clutch hit with runners at second and third and 2 outs? It's a story of baseball. It matters on who wins and loses in a given day. I just don't think it's very predictive. I don't think a team can be bad in the first half with runners in scoring position, and then you can say, all right, well, in July, August, and September, they're also going to hit 250 or 210 or whatever. You can't say based on their previous experience and numbers what's going to happen. You can't project it forward with very much confidence the rest of the way. So my general philosophy is that ignore it. You just don't pay attention. If they go over 20 with runners in scoring position, all right, maybe they'll go 10 for their next 20. You have no idea. But there does get to be a certain time when that number's in your head. And I think that number's in their head a little bit this week when the Twins have to answer questions about, well, you're such and such with runners in scoring position. Can you talk about how bad you guys have been? Answer the question. That starts to maybe pile up on a younger team with a little bit lesser experienced lineup. The same thing is true of their home record when they have to answer a bunch of questions at Target Field about, why can't you guys win at Target Field? I think that starts to play into a younger player's head. Maybe you start putting some pressure on yourself, and that in turn affects your performance and compounds the problem. So anyway, they dispatched with the runners in scoring position myth. Zach Granite had a big hit. Eduardo Escobar had a big hit, which I wrote about in the 5 Thoughts column for today. And then Miguel Sano gets an 0-2 hanging breaking ball that just kind of spun up at the top of the strike zone. He crushed it. Left center, went out to the bullpen. No doubt about it. 6-0 Twins lead turns into a 6-1 Twins win, and they take 2 of 3 from the Yankees. So, all of that having been said, I'm kind of curious to see what happens in these next 10, 11 days for the Twins. I'm on the record saying that they should be buyers at this trade deadline. I'm curious to know what you guys think, too. I see Chris has got a question in here, so I'm going to jump on the computer. I can read that a little bit better there. And we'll just get to as many as we can. Drop your questions in the comment box below, guys, and I'll answer as many of them as I possibly can before I have to get out of here. Justin, I see that you've got one, and then Chris will get to yours. Justin says that it all depends on what it takes and who we are buying. It's kind of a loaded question. When I guess the question that Justin's referring to here is when I posted on the 1500 ESPN Facebook page, are the Twins smart to be buyers at the MLB trade deadline? Yeah, it's a loaded question. I mean, that's what got you guys in here. I think that the black and white, this like pure dichotomy of should they be buyers or should they be sellers is a little bit of a false narrative. I think my personal stance is that the Twins should try to make the 2017 team better, but I also see why they'd want to make the 2018 team a priority, and 2018 and beyond. 2018, 2019, 2020. Yeah, that should probably be a priority because I think that this team is flawed. But saying that this team is flawed and saying that this team doesn't deserve to have pieces added to it, I think are two different things, and I'd argue all day against the second argument. I'd say that this team, if you added an 8th inning guy or a 9th inning guy, and or added a legitimate 2nd or 3rd starter, suddenly the composition of the team that's getting the bulk of the innings in the important times of baseball games changes. It's a fundamentally different team. I know it's only one piece, so it sounds like a sort of a drastic statement to make, but if you go into a game or a series, let's just say a 5-game series, and you have 3 starting pitchers that you trust, Urban Santana, J.O. Barrios, and whoever this third mystery guy is, whether he's an ace, probably not, a number 2, probably not, a number 3, maybe. If you've got those 3 guys, and you have a trio of bullpen guys, Brandon Kinsler and Taylor Rogers, and whoever your new 9th inning guy is, or whoever your new 8th or 9th, whatever, doesn't matter, that looks different than going into a series saying, well, we got 2 starters that we kind of like, but Irv's got to go against the other team's ace, so we're in some trouble, and a bullpen really shaky. We don't trust him outside of Kinsler and Rogers. It's a different ball game for me, and they do have a lineup that I feel is respectable. Yeah, they have to hit lefties better, and that'd be a tough matchup if they got a lefty ace in October, but I think they should get there, roll the dice, see what happens with the 2017 team. I wouldn't give up a top prospect, but Justin, that's kind of my thoughts when you ask or you say that it's a loaded question. It is a loaded question, but I think that when we try to draw it like a line right in the sand, I think that's kind of wrong. I think it's it's selling things short to say it's either this or that. I think the Twins are going to have a couple of options here the next week to 10 days. So anyway, don't disagree at all with what you're saying, Justin. Chris wants to know, if you were making the decision, are you going after someone like Gray? That'd be Oakland's Sonny Gray. Chris says, or do you go lesser guy like Samardzija, but he's pricey? But contract-wise, I assume you're talking, Chris. Yeah, that's sort of the central question, and I think, personally, on this team, it makes more sense to go after someone. I don't know that I love Samardzija, but somebody like that. I've seen the name Dan Straley floated out. Okay, he's not really exciting, but he's more exciting than another name I've seen asked about this week, Edinson Volquez. Edinson Volquez doesn't do anything for me. I personally, if I was the Twins, wouldn't look to a position where I'm putting somebody that's questionably better than Adalberto Mejia. I would want Mejia to be like the fourth guy that is going to make some starts, and you hope he helps you win some games the rest of the stretch, but then you're not really counting on him in a big way in October. I think you want it set up so you win the division, because that's big. If you can do that and avoid that one-game playoff, money. But then, if you're slating it for a 5-game series, you've got Irv starting against somebody else's ace. I don't think the Twins are a coin flip in any of those games. I think they're less than 50% chance to win against the other contenders. But it's not like a 10% chance to win. Maybe the Twins have a 42% chance. And you'll take that. And then Barreal starting game 2. Whoever your new guy is starting game 3. Or, if you can get somebody better than a Dan Straley, get somebody who would make a real impact, like what you're talking about, Chris, Sonny Gray, and maybe Sonny Gray starts game 1 or 2 for you, that bumps Barreal back and I think changes the math of a series. But, to your question, you're going to have to give up a lot to get a guy like Sonny Gray from Oakland, and in fact, I read a report just before jumping on here that the Houston Astros are intensifying their pursuit of Sonny Gray. That makes all the sense in the world. I think if you're the Astros, you're willing to flip prospects for win-now pitchers, they're in the spot to do it. The Twins, slightly different spot, but I don't think they should back down from the bidding table. If it's a bidding war over Sonny Gray and it's just driving the price up and up and up, and you're going to have to give up, a good pitcher or a good pitching prospect and Nick Gordon, all right, well, that kind of changes my opinion of what you're getting back. But Sonny Gray, team controllable. So I don't know. I've been an advocate for that. In the past, I said last year that the Twins should go after Chris Sale. Or this is 2 years ago, sorry. And everyone said, you're crazy, Chris Sale's untradeable. And it turns out that it wasn't a great fit for the Twins, just given where they were kind of on the win curve. And given the price that it costs to acquire Chris Sale. But just remember, it's not crazy to suggest that you should go after an ace, especially if you're ready to go to the playoffs, you're ready to make a bid for that. I'm not sure that the Twins feel that they're there. You read all their public comments, and all you keep hearing is, we're an okay team. We've won some games, but I think our future teams are going to be better, so why spend any time and energy investing into this year's team? I get that. I'm personally not offended by it. I can see why Twins fans might be offended by it. I can see why Twins players might be offended by it. But I also do see some logic in the line of thinking that says, hey, we're sort of building this thing. We got a young core. Let's, the proverbial keep your powder dry. Kind of what the Twins might do. I also see why they would want to add pieces at the trade deadline that would be controllable for 2018 and beyond. If you're going to go get a rental guy, like a Pat Neshek, who's the other rental that just went to Arizona, J.D. Martinez. Would J.D. Martinez help the Twins be a better team? Yeah! He was like the best hitter that's believed to be available. Now I think the best hitter might be Andrew McCutchen. J.D. Martinez would have definitely helped the Twins, but I can see not wanting to give up a haul of prospects to get a guy for the next 2 months and see what happens in October, especially if you're the Twins and you feel kind of okay about your outfield right now. So, I don't know, Chris, that's a long way of answering your question, but Chris Archer, probably off the table. Sonny Gray, probably prohibitively expensive in terms of prospects. I wouldn't be afraid to eat some salary if I was the Twins, to pay a guy who's making a lot of money. I mean, look, they're already doing that with Phil Hughes. Probably done for the year, and they're paying him $13 million. That happens. Money is just money. You can expend that resource, but I do think that in terms of prospects, you should probably be hanging on to your best ones in a year that you don't believe that you're legitimate World Series contenders. So that's kind of my thoughts on that, Chris, in terms of which pitchers I'd go after. Let me see what other questions we got up here, though. Chris, thanks for dropping by. Okay, Craig says that Mejia is becoming a nice number 4 starter. If they add Gray, doesn't this staff set up for the next couple years as a solid contender? Yes, is the short answer to that question. I also think you have to consider a couple of things here. What's going to happen with Phil Hughes? Maybe you're just expecting to never get any starts out of him again. I don't know. I don't think that's the Twins' rationale, not after talking with people this week at Target Field. But if you're looking at this thing objectively from the outside and saying, yeah, they're going to pay him $13 million next year and the year after that, but how many starts do you think he's going to make? How many innings? Mejia, I think, and I talked to a scout this week at Target Field who has Mejia right now as kind of a number 5 starter with the upside of being a number 3, number 4, and I tend to agree with that. I like his fastball. The fact that he can command it when he's commanding it is nice, and then he's got a good changeup and breaking ball, but the problem becomes if that breaking ball doesn't go for strikes or he's not commanding his fastball, suddenly he's a pretty hittable lefty because it's not like he's blowing it by you with velocity. So I like Mejia just fine. I think I'd expect him to be a back-end starter and nothing more. Then, you flip to the veteran side of the things. What do you expect from Phil Hughes, Kyle Gibson, Hector Santiago, who's a free agent this winter anyway? Or does he have an arbitration year left? Either way, I'm not expecting a ton of innings from that trio over the next 3 years. I think kind of what you get is gravy, and maybe it's depth. But I think Mejia and Trevor May are 2 interesting wild cards to this conversation, and they might be justification for hanging on to a guy like Ervin Santana. Because if you go Santana, Barrios, May, Mejia, I kind of like the way that rotation starts out. You don't have an ace in the bunch, but you got a couple of guys who are, I think Barrios is a 2, and I think the other 3 guys are a 3, if we're putting labels and numbers and everything like that on them, which I don't love to do, but whatever. So you've got a bunch of mid-rotation starters. That's a good place to start if you're the Twins. You also got to consider prospects. I think Fernando Romero is going to be a good pitcher in the big leagues. I think Steven Gonzalez deserves a chance to show whether he's going to be a good pitcher in the big leagues. If you add Sonny Gray, it gets a little crowded, but a crowded pitching staff is nothing to worry about. Craig, I'd have to dig in a little bit more on Sonny Gray's peripherals because I know he's kind of been like up, but then back down, and then back up again this year. I've loved him for a while, and when he got hurt a couple years ago, was that 2015? I thought that was a really bad break for Oakland. Maybe that was last year. Because I think he's a great trade chip. I think any contender would like to have Sonny Gray in their starting rotation. But I think if you're the Twins, do you try to get into a bidding war over Sonny Gray? I don't know. I think if you're the Astros or a team like that, you're a much more motivated buyer. The Yankees, I think, could use another starting pitcher. You're a much more motivated buyer. You might be willing to give up more than the Twins. So, Craig, that's a long, long-winded, probably bad answer to your question. But when you ask if the staff is set up for a couple years with Sonny Gray, yes, it is. I think that's a nice pitching staff, especially if Sonny Gray can pitch like an ace. Maybe he's a 1B guy as well, more like I think Jose Quintana's sort of a 1B guy. I don't know. I think it would be nice, but you also have to consider the cost in terms of prospects if you're the Twins. So that's sort of where this whole tie-up sits this week. Terry wants to know, Trevor Cahill of the Padres or Jaime Garcia of the Braves do anything for you? I'd have to go back up and look their numbers. When I was looking last week, Terry, they weren't on my list. But that's because I was taking sort of high-end guys, and I was taking guys with team control years. So I don't even know what the contracts are, to be honest, off the top of my head, for Trevor Cahill and Jaime Garcia. If Garcia is still that ground ball guy who relies on his sink and just turning batted balls into outs, I think I'd be cautiously interested. But here's an interesting thing. If the Twins add a ground ball guy, do you consider pulling Jorge Polanco? He's no longer the shortstop and just go with A-Ray Adrianza. I like Miguel Sano at third base. He's shown to be more sure-handed than I expected this year. He makes the charge play better than I expected he would. He's got a killer arm. He can make that backhand play just as well as, the cannon-armed guys like Adrian Beltre and Manny Machado. He's definitely not in their stratosphere in terms of defensive overall, but if you're talking about just going to your backhand a step, planting, and firing a rocket to get a speedy runner, you trust Miguel Sano with that now. So the left side of your infield looks like Sano at third, sure-handed A-Ray Adrianza at shortstop, Brian Dozier, who's been good defensively this year, and Joe Mauer, who should probably win a gold glove at first base. Ground ball pitcher in that environment is pretty interesting to me. It's one of the reasons I thought Kyle Gibson could be better this year. Mixed bag in that regard, but he's been like a 5 ERA guy over his last 10 starts. Maybe Kyle Gibson just is what he is at this point. But to answer your question better, Terry, I'd have to go back and look. I'd have to see the contracts, the numbers, and figure that stuff out. Also curious to know what the cost would be of acquiring those two guys. So thanks for the question, but can't give you a very good answer. Sorry. Joe wants to know, they are dragging their feet. All the good ones are gone. They are dragging their feet. It looks like there could have been some trades pulled off. Really, the Diamondbacks kicked this whole thing off. They got Taijuan Walker, right? And they also made the big J.D. Martinez trade. It's like, all right, going for it. Here we go. They upgraded from a pretty crappy left field situation to the best hitter available. J.D. Martinez still quietly underrated and joins another guy who's severely underrated, at least from what I hear from fans and stuff like that. Paul Goldschmidt's one of the best hitters in baseball in the last 5 years, and he's still flying somewhat under the radar. So that's a pretty intimidating lineup now if you're Arizona, and you add that to what they've done on the pitching side of things this year. That's kind of an intriguing team come October. So we'll see what happens there. The Mariners also just made a trade for David Phelps. He's a reliever from the Marlins. The Marlins have another reliever, A.J. Ramos, who's widely rumored to be available. I think he's closing games for them, but I don't really care who gets the saves. I want to know who gets the high leverage outs, who goes up against the middle of the order with the game on the line. So anyway, Joe, yeah, some good players are going. Quintana got dealt to the Cubs last week, but there's nobody outside of Phelps that I would have thought, oh, why weren't you in on that? Why weren't you in on J.D. Martinez? I get why the Twins wouldn't be in on J.D. Martinez. So, yeah, there are some good players that are starting to move, but all I think that means is the game of musical chairs has begun. I don't think that the music has quite stopped. So, valid concern, but I think there are still some good players out there that you could go get if you're the Twins. Thanks for the question. Benjamin wants to know, how's the coffee? Coffee's great. Brewed it myself. Thank you. It's actually the Caribou blend, I'm lying. But I did brew it myself in my own coffee maker. So, there's that. Let's see. We got some baseball questions here. Whoops, sorry, I scrolled too far. Andy wants to know, few names for your thoughts. Starters Dylan Bundy or Matt Harvey? Let's start there, and I'll get your other two names. Dylan Bundy's always been intriguing to me. I was with the Orioles when he was going through his first dance of getting platelet injections and then eventually needing Tommy John. Big arm, nice pitcher. But if you're the Orioles, why would you give up starting pitching? I'm curious to know if he's available, Andy. If you've seen that somewhere, send a link my way or just put it on the comments. That'd be great. But if you're Baltimore, you desperately need to someday build a good pitching staff. They're terrible at pitching, and they've always been bad at building pitching staffs. When I was there, Scott Tillman was their ace, or Chris Tillman. They acquired Scott Feldman and Bud Norris at the trade deadline, and they had Jason Hamill in that rotation, and it was okay, here you go, boys. Go line up that starting rotation with the Yankees of old, and I can't remember who bounced them in the playoffs that year, because I was back in Minnesota by the time that happened. Anyway, I wouldn't trade Bundy if I was Baltimore. I don't know if the suggestion is out there, and I don't know what the cost would be. So that's maybe a bad answer on my part, but that's my thoughts on that. Matt Harvey. Matt Harvey's an interesting one because it's like, it's a little bit like Justin Verlander, in my opinion, where you're like, I'm not just trading for the player value, I'm trading for the player perceived value, and I'm also paying a tax in the fact that this guy was a star associated with his market. I mean, Matt Harvey, the Dark Knight, great, but now thoracic outlet syndrome, and also just seems like a rift a little bit with the organization. Like, now what do you expect out of Matt Harvey? Is he that same guy? So, personally, I wouldn't want to pay the star tax, which is to say, guy used to be a star, so you have to pay big money or big prospects to get him. I'm only interested in paying for his present and future production. So, from that perspective, if the cost is too high on Matt Harvey, I'm out. But, if it's just middle tier prospect and take him on and see if you can fix it, I'm interested. I'm all for buying lottery tickets in this regard. Let's see, Zach Britton as a reliever or Pat Neshek. I like the idea of adding Pat Neshek. Great year in Philadelphia. Bring him home. I don't think that there's any bad blood anymore with the Twins organization like there reportedly was on his way out of town. Great, solid reliever the last couple of years. You'd have two interesting sidearmers in Neshek and Trevor Hildenberger. I kind of like Trevor Hildenberger. You guys see yesterday, Aaron Judge, he gets him to a 2-strike count, and then instead of dropping down, he comes back over the top and goes, I think it was like 94. He blew it by Judge for the strikeout. That's an interesting outing for Trevor Hildenberger. Curious to see what happens the rest of the year for him. Zach Britton, yeah, a lot of guys like Zach Britton as a ground ball dominant guy, but I don't know what that costs to acquire. I do know that if you're going to add a closer to this bullpen, it should be no problem. Based on talking with people around the team, Brandon Kinsler, and this is also my own personal observation, he doesn't seem to have much of an ego about him. He's perfectly fine talking about how he was just an independent ball a couple years ago, how he'd been kicked to the curb, and he's like, doesn't seem to hold any bad blood for any of that stuff. I think if you asked him to pitch in the 8th inning and you added a closer, no problem at all. So in terms of clubhouse management, I think that the Twins would be just fine to add a 9th inning guy if they thought the cost was right. So anyway, I'm most interested in Neshek on your list, oddly enough, even though he's maybe the least valuable pitcher of the 4 you mentioned, Andy. But he will be a free agent this year, and based on all the public comments of the Twins, dating back to when I talked to them in D.C. at the winter meetings in December, they've basically said they want players with team control for 2018 and beyond. Kind of have to expect that they're going to stick with that they're not going to add a rental player like Pat Neshek. But who knows? If the cost comes down so much, if it doesn't cost a lot to get a rental reliever, yeah, I think it's absolutely worth pursuing. Whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to move the camera. Kyle, Byron Buxton could be a good piece to use to get another starting pitcher. I feel at this point, almost 700 at-bats in, we know the type of hitter he is, a liability. And I don't think his defensive prowess makes up for that. Could you see the Twins using or moving him? Short answer is no. I don't see Byron Buxton getting traded. I disagree with you. I think his defensive prowess does make up for his offensive futility. And I think that there's still this non-zero chance that he becomes the overall, like, all-around star that the Twins were hoping he was maybe 2 years ago. He's 23 years old, so the fact that he can't make contact in the big leagues, yeah, it's concerning. Like, trust me, he's got issues. But I also think he turns 24 in December, and there are some guys in Double-A at 22, 23, 24 that were like, oh, interesting, he could make a future big leaguer someday, and Buxton's been doing it for a couple years. Yeah, he's struggling. Don't get me wrong. I've been one of Buxton's biggest critics. I think, at least, I mean, among mainstream media. There are some people on Twitter who hate Byron Buxton. But I personally think that he's a good player. I think his defense is excellent. I think he could be a Gold Glove center fielder this year. He probably won't. Just the name recognition isn't quite there. But I wouldn't give up on Byron Buxton unless you're getting, like, if he's the centerpiece in a Chris Archer trade because the Rays decided, let's get another speedy center fielder and sell our ace while we're in the playoff hunt, then fine, I'm listening, but I don't think that's where conversations should start for the Twins. I think if you're building around Miguel Sano, Jose Barrios, to a lesser extent Max Kepler and Byron Buxton, I think that's a good place to start. So, yeah, you got to fix your pitching, but I'd go a different way to try to address that. Chris wants to know, why are they giving Granite such a look over Buxton? Buxton can hit better, but not by much, and is much better on defense. Chris, Byron Buxton's on the disabled list, which is why he's not playing right now. I don't know when he'll be back, but probably soon. It sounded like there was some chatter behind the scenes this week to try to figure out what's the next step for Byron Buxton to get back from the DL, but he's got a strained groin, so that's why Zach Granite. I think Zach Granite would probably be in the minor leagues if Buxton was healthy right now. If you had to choose between Kenny Vargas and Zach Granite, it's an interesting conversation right now. But I do think that Zach Granite's got a future. Maybe I'm in the minority here. A lot of people that I've heard from on Twitter and in person say that Zach Granite's a future fourth outfielder. I don't know. Maybe he is, but I think he could have a little more potential than that. I think Zach Granite's a future starter, whether it's for this team or somebody else. I think he can play. But right now, the reason that he's playing is because Byron Buxton's hurt. So it's pretty simple from that regard. Let's see here. Okay, Anthony has a good question, and unless we got some more here, we can wrap up with this one. It's a good question, and it's kind of like the central question. Maybe I'll write about this in the rest of my off day today, or maybe tomorrow. Anthony wants to know, is starting pitcher or relief pitcher a bigger need at the moment, in your opinion? And what are your most logical gets for the Twins? So I'll answer the first part first, and then let me dig into an old column I wrote. Let me pull that up right now to give you some of the gets that I think that the Twins should pursue. Excuse me. Anthony's starting pitcher or relief pitcher is always sort of this like two-tiered approach to fixing teams. Now, if you're the Yankees and you can go add relievers like Tommy Kahnle and David Robertson, do that. Never say no to that. I can't wait to see the Yankees in the postseason. I think they're going to make it, and fascinated to know how Joe Girardi is going to manage that bullpen. When you've got Aroldis Chapman closing games, Dellin Betances, who, yes, has had his struggles throwing the ball in the strike zone this year, but he's Dellin Betances. Those two guys at the back end. You've got Tommy Kahnle added to the mix now, who's quietly a legit relief ace. David Robertson is now maybe like a seventh inning guy. He might supplant Betances in the eighth, or they might play matchups or whatever. But like, that's four great relievers, and we're not even talking about guys like Adam Warren, and they've got some other like. The Yankees bullpen is a force now, and I'm curious to see how that plays out. The Indians rode Andrew Miller all the way to the World Series last year, not to mention the mix of Cody Allen. I think they had Zach McAllister make some important relief outings for them, but this is just, you haven't seen, and Brian Shaw, maybe I was forgetting. This is sort of, maybe, this is a new age of baseball where you spend 6 months grinding to try to get to the postseason, and you need starting pitching for that. You need a good lineup, and you need some important relief outings throughout the year. And then you get to October, and you need a lead after 5 innings. And then you hand it over to ace coming out of the bullpen. So anyway, it's like a two-tiered approach because starting pitching, no doubt about it, is more important overall than bullpen. I know Brian Kenny's philosophies of bullpenning and how that can be important, not just in October, but throughout the regular season. But I'm telling you that the way that teams manage their rosters right now, starting pitching is going to continue to get the bulk of the innings, and it's, by extension, more important. If you have a guy who's great for, facing 21 batters a day, 25 batters a day, that's going to be more important than the guy who faces 4 batters in the 8th inning, even though it's a key spot. The gap may be closing, and in October, maybe the gap is like this, but keep in mind, you don't get to use Andrew Miller in the 7th inning of a 1-run ball game if it's a 9-run ball game because your starting pitching sucks. So, like, I get it, and I think I'm all for this new wave of bullpen starting to dominate the game, and the way that the Yankees are going to try to do that this October will be fascinating. But starting pitching is first and foremost the most important thing, and for the Twins to, I guess it's a two-part question. To get to October, they need a better starting staff. They just do. So I'd add a starting pitcher. Once you're in October, I'm not sure how many contenders the Twins' rotation currently lines up with, but if you could add a closer and then Brandon Kintzler's your 8th inning guy and Taylor Rogers is your 7th inning guy or lefty matchup guy, it gets a little bit more interesting. And if Ryan Presley can sort of turn things around and use his excellent stuff to become a trusted reliever again, this is kind of an interesting bullpen. So, long way of answering your question, Anthony, but the more important thing is starting pitcher, which is a more likely target, relief pitcher. I think the costs are going to be considerably less expensive. Now, you ask who should the Twins target. I wrote a column when? Got the date on it. July 7th, 2 weeks ago, about the targets for the Twins, potential trade deadline targets. And I'll leave you guys with this. And if there are more questions, I'll come back. I'll answer them, I promise. But the video's running a little long here, so I got to bounce. But I wrote about 13 non-rental players that the Twins should go get. This was right after Thad Levine came out. Actually, it was the day before. But Thad Levine said on our radio station, on 1500 ESPN, we're not really enamored with the rental market, which is players who are going to be free agents this winter. Yeah, they could help us, but I think what he was basically saying, if I can read between the lines, is like the price to acquire those guys and the value that they're going to give you over the next 2 months plus maybe October, it doesn't quite match up for the Twins, especially they think that they're sort of on the rise as an organization. So I get that. Now you want team control for 2018, maybe beyond. All right, so I gave you 13 names of guys that won't walk this winter. That if you go acquire them, yeah, they probably cost more because you're getting more value from them, but that you can control for next year and in some cases the year beyond that. So with that in mind, Anthony, and I see your question. Tim's got a great question about rental players and the World Series, and Tim, I'll have to answer that offline. Maybe that's a good column for someday. I guess you could look into that, and if it hasn't happened recently, you might say that teams not in the rental market don't consider themselves World Series contenders. Just a thought. But I'll answer your last question here, Anthony, and then I'm going to jet out of here. 13 players, and some of them have already been moved, so that list has shrunk a little bit, and it shrunk this morning further when David Phelps was traded from the Marlins to the Mariners. But here's the list. Starting pitching. Sonny Gray. We talked about him earlier in the video. If you missed it, go back and watch the early part of this. Jose Quintana. Oh, he's been traded, so he's off. Garrett Cole. Now, since I wrote this, it sounds more likely that the Pirates hang on to Cole. And I don't really think of him in the same category as a guy like, Chris Sale. The nice thing is he'd be controllable for 2018, 2019, and then he's a free agent 2020. You could kind of work with this moldable ball of clay who has ace potential, but has like a 4.43 ERA, at least at the time of the writing. So I'm a little less interested in Cole, but 2 years of team control, can't deny that. Relief pitching, A.J. Ramos, he's still out there, and it looks like the Marlins are open for business. David Phelps, gone. Mets, lefty Jerry Blevins. I liked him this winter. The Mets got him on, I think it was a 2-year deal or a 1-year deal with a team option. In either case, he's got $7 million on the books for next year that you could pick up. So if you're the Twins, trade for Jerry Blevins. He's a back-end bullpen option. And then he's also under team control for next year for $7 million. Now, if you want to shoot a little bit higher on the relief market, Brad Hand, that's going to be expensive. So maybe you add that, maybe you don't. He's the lefty from Chaska, actually. So kind of cool. We like local kids, right? Another sort of maybe under the radar, I'd have to go back and look at his numbers now, but Kirby Yates was throwing up a 2 ERA at the time I wrote this, albeit with a little bit higher xFIP, 2.84 xFIP, so maybe he's not a 2 ERA guy, but arbitration raise next year, arbitration raise the year after that, arbitration raise the year after that before he hits free agency. 3 years of team control. Maybe the Padres don't want to deal a guy like Kirby Yates, but that'd be a team controllable bullpen option for you. The Giants, George Kontos. I know everyone's talking about Hunter Strickland. I don't know why. Maybe it's the beanball incident with Bryce Harper, but I'm just not that interested in Hunter Strickland. George Kontos had some nice numbers at the time I wrote this. 2 more years of team control for him. Now moving on to the rest of the relief list, because that's mostly what this list comprised. David Robertson, oops, he's gone. Sean Doolittle, oops, he's gone. Ryan Madsen, oops, he's gone. So teams have sort of pounced on the relief market a little bit. There's still some good ones out there. And if you're the Twins and you're willing to pay for years of team control, I say go for it. Lashley, and this was just, I admitted this in the column. I said this is a bit of a hot take from me. But the Twins need somebody who can mash left-handed pitching. Andrew McCutchen does that. He's got another year. It's a team option, I think. But he's like $14.5 million for next year. Go get Andrew McCutchen if you want to hit lefties a little bit better. Stabilizing veteran presence in the lineup. Now you're not so worried about the outfield mix. You've got a nice, I'd slide him over to the corner, probably play Buxton in center, or mix in Rosario and Kepler in center and keep the other bats in the lineup. A lot of things to think about. I think primarily on the relief market if you're the Twins, but it's not exclusively relievers. So, Anthony, I hope that answered your question. Which is more important? Starting pitching, which is more likely? Relief pitching, the surplus of targets, probably in the bullpen as well. So that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for stopping by. Twins Q&A, the coffee edition of Twins Q&A. I'll answer as many of your questions offline as I can. Send them to me on my Facebook page. What is it? Facebook.com/Derek Wetmore MLB, I believe. I'm not 100% sure about the URL. But I'll answer all the questions on here, or go find my Facebook page, Derek Wetmore MLB, and we'll catch you guys next time. More Touch 'em All podcasts next week, too. If you're not already subscribed, go check out iTunes for that. That's enough self-promotion for me. I'm going to get out of here. Enjoy the rest of your day, guys.